Hi everyone, welcome today's webinar, The Good, Bad, and Ugly of Gen AI in Fraud and AML. We'll be talking about persuasion, automation, and maybe a little bit of AI agents. I'm Russ Warnloff, Marketing Director here at Unit21. Really just going to do some quick housekeeping before we jump into it. First of all, this session is being recorded and will be available a few hours after this call at the same link that you're watching this now. Second of all, this is going to be a highly interactive session. So we've got a couple polls teed up for y'all. We also encourage everyone to utilize the Q&A session. If you have any questions on any topics for any particular panelists, feel free to submit any questions through the Q&A panel, and we're going to answer those at the end of this session. And also want to point people to Resources Center. If you want to learn a little bit more about Gen AI, specifically the application of AI agents, there's a lot of great resources there. Encourage you to check those out. So I am so excited to bring together this group of great experts, diverse opinions on Gen AI and their various applications for fraud and AML. Today, we're here with Dana Lawrence, Haley Wyndham, Matt Hogan, and Trisha Kothari. I think what would be helpful for folks on the call, if y'all could just do a kind of a quick overview of your background, it'd be great. Share that with the group. So Dana, let's go ahead and start with you.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. We're so glad that you could join us today. My name is Dana Lawrence, and I've spent the last 20 plus years working in financial services, started out in traditional banking and then moved into fintech starting in 2014. And my focus has always been risk management, compliance, including BSA, AML, and kind of all things governance. So I'm really excited to be on this panel today. Currently, I'm Senior Director of FinTech Compliance at Pacific West Bank. Great to be here. Thanks, Ross.
Awesome. Thanks, Dana. Haley, how about you?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Haley Wyndham. I am the brand ambassador for Mission Omega and the podcast host for Banking on Fraudology. I have been in banking for over 10 years. I started as a teller, went through operations, really had a heart for operations, and then dove into the world of fraud. No one wanted it, and then for some reason I fell in love with it, and I haven't stopped fighting it since that day. So very happy to be on here and with this awesome lineup of panelists today.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you. Matt, how about you next?
Hey everybody, my name is Matt Hogan. I'm a detective with the Connecticut State Police and a task force officer with the Secret Service on their Financial Crimes Task Force. I've been doing financial crime since like 2016-ish. Started getting into the crypto space probably around 2020 or so. And just obviously that touches everything that we're going to be talking about today. So I have a kind of a diverse background. I'm actually a CAM certified cop, which doesn't happen very often. So I get my feet in a little bit of everything. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Matt. And last but not least, Trisha.
Awesome. Firstly, thank you everyone for joining us from around the world for this webinar. I'm Trisha, founder and CEO of Unit21. Really excited to talk about all things AI with Dana, Haley, and Matt. We're really lucky to have such an esteemed group of panelists with us today, and I can't wait to dive in. All right, so let's dive in. I think the first thing that I want to talk about is now it has been a little over 2 years since generative AI became public with ChatGPT. And I remember just a few weeks after ChatGPT was launched, we saw the rise of fraud GPT and fraudsters leveraging AI in order to really conduct much more sophisticated operations. And as we've wrapped up 2024, I was looking at our data in the past year and what we are seeing in our trends. And today, 40% of the reasons that our customers block transactions is scams. Today, compared to even 2023, the FBI is seeing a 23% increase in scams. And of course, needless to say, the proliferation of AI has made scams a really, really big problem. So fraudsters were the earliest adopters of Gen AI. I think even compared to companies, fraudsters were they don't care about is this GDPR compliant or is this SOC 2 compliant? They're just going to do it. And they leveraged AI. And so I'm sure everyone's received some Nigerian prince email scam in their life before. And you know it's a scam because, there's these punctuation errors and spelling mistakes. So that was much more easily identifiable. But today, the sophistication of scams is at another level, with voice cloning, with really believable emails, believable scenarios. And this is only going to become a bigger risk. So I'm really excited to firstly dive into what can operators do now. We know fraudsters are the early adopters. We've seen this in our data already at Unit21. What can we as an industry do so that we are not, we're really, this is a war. Right now, it's not just a battle, it's a war. And how can we make sure that we win this war? And then finally, what is the outlook on 2025? AI is this one industry where something changes every other day. There is, one weekend, if you are not on your computer, there's something new happening in AI. In the last week, OpenAI released Operator, which, if folks haven't seen, it's a way for you to say that, hey, AI, I want you to go to Expedia and actually find the cheapest ticket from San Francisco to New York and book it, and it'll get booked, which is absolutely game-changing. And this weekend, we had DeepSeek from China release an AI model that is about 10x cheaper than what is there in the US. So it's amazing, just the pace of growth. And I'm really excited to dive in with everyone on the outlook of 2025. All right, before we do that, let's get a poll from the audience on what is holding you back from investing in AI for risk and compliance. For what we are seeing, fraudsters adopted this 2 years ago. The industry is now looking to adopt it. But what is the biggest concern? And yeah, let's give it a minute to get results.
Trisha, I just have to comment about what you said about fraudsters not having to conform to any compliance or governance standards. That is so rude. There's so many things we have to think about on the banking side. Is this subject to model risk management? Is it subject to any type of fair lending bias? There's so many things we need to consider. And then we're up against the people who can just try whatever they want as quickly as they want and just generate as much as they want. So, we're definitely operating under different parameters. So I'm sure we'll dive into that, but that was a good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So we have finished the poll, and I'll say, as I'm seeing the chat, we have people from Mississippi and Toronto, London, North Dakota, Rio de Janeiro. So thank you for joining us from around the world. All right. So the biggest, what is interesting is 44%. So the biggest reason for why people are saying that they're held back from investing in AI is explainability and regulatory concerns. The next biggest reason is accuracy and hallucination risk. The third is that, hey, what I'm using, my current vendors don't offer AI. And then we have a couple folks saying that, hey, I don't see the value or job preservation, but that's significantly lower. So the biggest reason, explainability. The second biggest reason, accuracy. And the third biggest reason, that my current technology does not offer AI. What do you, I'm curious, for all three of you, what do you think about this?
Go ahead, Dana, if you want to go first.
Sure. So being from the highly regulated side, I understand all of these answers because the regulators have been very clear that all existing laws still apply. So I think it's going to be interesting, at least from my regulator, the FDIC. They recently had a change in their leadership, and they came out with some statements saying that they wanted to be a little bit more open-minded when it came to the use of new technology. So I think that's going to be interesting. But I think with regards to this, I am going to touch on this during some of the segments of this presentation today, how I think about being able to take advantage of some aspects of AI and still doing it in a way that is going to hopefully get good regulatory outcomes. So I hear you. This is definitely a risk, and let's kind of dive into some of the ways that we can think around it. So that's my take. Matt,
I agree too, except from the. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, ladies first, please.
I was just going to say, I agree on, we are going to touch on this later, but, whenever I look at the answers that say job preservation, it kind of, I don't like it because I know that AI is going to be a partner to the fraud fighter. It's not supposed to replace, it's supposed to enhance. And I'm really excited to dive into that later. I think the other is, current technologies don't offer AI. That's when you've got to start looking. You need to make that exit plan to find a better solution, because if we're still trying to fight fraud with manual processes, it's not going to work.
Yeah, just then really quickly to touch on law enforcement, because that's probably something no one ever thinks about in this kind of space. But regulatory is obviously probably the biggest thing we are concerned with AI, because you got to think about evidence admissibility issues, how we prove how we got the information, how we know it's accurate. So, we're talking about hallucinations, things like that. So there's a lot of issues with integrating AI into law enforcement, but it's a super critical part. It would make our lives a lot easier for sure. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think these are really great points. And as Dana mentioned, we, as an industry, we still have to be compliant from a regulatory standpoint. And so today, where the regulation is, it's not that, oh, the AI is making the decision and doing something willy-nilly. That is not acceptable. So as an industry, we have to leverage AI in where can we automate with explainability. And I love what Haley said, which is that if your current technology does not offer AI, then it's time to make an exit plan. This is the computing era. This is like the new computing era, where there is going to be a set of companies that say, okay, we're going to use computers, and there's going to be a set of companies that say we're still going to use the paper or the fax machine, and it'll be very clear which companies fall in what category. So really appreciate that. All right, so let's dive into firstly Gen AI in the hands of fraudsters. We spoke a little bit about it, where fraudsters are the early adopters here. We have seen such insane degrees of scams. We recently saw at Unit21 a voice AI scam where a grandparent was called by their grandchild, and the grandchild said, hey, don't tell mom and dad, but I really need this money. And the grandparent sends the money and doesn't find out for months, because they obviously don't tell their kid. And then it comes out later on that it was a scam. So these types of scams are only going to proliferate. Matt, as someone who is in law enforcement, you see this every day. The FBI already has reported scams as a #1 financial crime today. What is your perspective here?
Not to ruin everybody's opinion, but I'm scared, honestly. It's going to get rough, I think. One of the main reasons is because what we're just talking about, adoption, right? A lot of companies and agencies and law enforcement don't want to adopt this because they don't really know how to use it properly yet. So obviously we were just talking about how criminals don't really abide by the laws, right? They don't follow gun laws, they don't follow anything, right? So why are they going to follow AI laws? So what I guess see here is just proliferation at a very large scale, with everything from pig butchering scams to just typical phishing, smishing, anything you could think of is just going to be enhanced that much more. And like I even the other day, yesterday I posted a ridiculous video on LinkedIn of me with hair using 2 different forms of AI tools, and it took me probably like 6 minutes to do it. It wasn't that great, but if you have an entire operation, if you think of these scams as large scale operations like businesses, they have the availability and time to sit down and really develop pretty significant AI tools and to build out these fraud models, and really are going to be punishing our pockets big time. So
I want to thank you for your service of making that post because I feel like it was kind of silly and fun, but you got so many people's attention to this topic of like you can create a deep fake of anyone like very quickly and easily.
Yeah, it was super easy. I was literally in bed while my kids were climbing all over me, and I'm doing this ridiculous thing. So it took a matter of minutes to do it, which is scary.
Yeah, it is really a brave new world here. I'm curious, Haley, you run a risk team at a credit union. What do you see today?
Well, when I was a practitioner, I was seeing this, but now that I'm having conversations with credit unions and banks every day, the real-time fraud is where, we are really concerned. As our technology defenses improve, so do the fraudsters' tactics. They're going to find a way around whatever controls we put in place. Fraudsters are using Gen AI tools that can respond in real time to our security checks, or those authentication measures. So it's as they continue to expand their tactics, we've got to continue to enhance our defenses. Even the ability to generate the realistic synthetic identities using the fake yet plausible data. It's a struggle, especially for those fraud teams that are working in a manual environment. And then that scalability and adaptability. Fraudsters are everywhere. I like to quote the Grinch here and say they are relentless, because we see it and it's constantly changing. The only constant we can agree on is that fraud is inconstant.
Well, yeah, I was just talking about some of this morning with another call, and what I found interesting was people think they always incorporate fraud obviously beginning before it gets to the institution level, right? But then they use KYC. It seems to be like the catch-all for trying to stop fraud before it happens. But I just don't think like that's obviously reasonable for what we're talking about. You guys can obviously go further in depth than that. But when I get cases and where I'm getting any kind of subpoena information back, it seems like everyone wants to rely on the KYC onboarding process as like one of the main deterrents. But I just don't think that's at this point it's gonna be not sufficient anymore.
And building on that point, I think the scammers are getting more sophisticated in how to outsmart some of those CIP controls in digital onboarding, like the liveness checks. I think that was something that our industry always thought was kind of like, well, you can't get around that. But if are you doing a liveness check?
I'm doing it right now. Right? Easy to break.
Right. So it's like these controls that we thought were going to be really a source of protection, like we're going to have to come up with something new and pivot. One thing I wanted to point out is the sheer volume of these attacks is increasing, coupled with all of the massive data breaches of our confidential information. So I used to have pretty much very limited tech scams and hardly no scams coming to my personal email. And now, ever since some of these more notable data breaches, I have like a constant stream of them. And some of them are more sophisticated. And, as a practitioner in this space, like I hope I don't fall victim to it, but it is maybe a numbers game. And at some point, they're just going to get through to people. So my kind of final point on this, which Trisha brought up in the beginning, is they aren't subject to any of these governance requirements that we are on the banking side. So it definitely seems a little bit unfair.
Yeah.
And Haley, I don't know if I interrupted you, so go ahead. And also it might be helpful to define what pig butchering is for the audience if folks don't know.
You better know what it is.
Yeah, exactly. We've got two Operation Shamrock people on here. You better know what pig butchering is. So no, you didn't interrupt me, but I will say, adding to that, it's not only the governance side of things, but with the laws and regulations, but you also got to think internal processes. If fraudsters change their tactics, we've got to go through approval processes as well to change how we fight the fraud. And so that's a big issue too, is that we can't always pivot on a dime and change our controls to mitigate the new tactics. So that's always a big issue. And pig butchering, just for the group here, is a horrible scam that is targeting the everybody. I can't say it's one group over another, to take everything from them, from they say from snout to tail. So it's literally any and all financial assets that they have, through cryptocurrency scams and investment scams. And it's just an awful, prolific scam that is continuing to hit our industry hard.
Thank you all.
Hey,
Thank you for
Tricia,
sharing your thoughts.
we got a really good question from the audience that pertains to what we were just talking about. I don't know if we could ask it, but it says, what alternatives are there to the selfie test or the liveness checks to counteract the AI fraud against these controls that we thought would have been good enough? And I was just curious if anyone wanted to take that. And again, sorry to interrupt you.
No, I think it's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Do folks have any opinions? And I'll share my perspective in a bit. But
I think there is different types of data that's available on an applicant that we're going to have to continue to utilize. And that's where I look to technology providers to kind of suggest alternatives for that. Like, what other information can we use to verify that this person is who they say they are? So, honestly, I think the Unit21s and the people who help us with our KYC might have some good ideas.
yeah, so I'll share what we are doing, and it really is on what you are suggesting, Dana. Today, what the problem is KYC used to be a catch-all, but all fraud, money is lost after an account has been created. So KYC is clearly being circumvented.
Mm-hmm.
What we are leveraging is, instead of focusing on the identity, which now we know is, it really is not that secure anymore. We're focusing on the destination of funds. So where is this money going to? And there are two things that we have done. We recently launched a counterparty risk consortium. So we're saying that, hey, is this bank account routing number that the money is going to, is that a known bad destination by somebody else in a consortium of financial services? And we're really excited about that. And the second thing that we're getting is verification of the bank account routing number. Again, we're partnering, we're going to be announcing this soon, but we're going to be partnering with a company to provide this data. So to Dana's point, the really important thing is that we need to get more data points. KYC is no longer a safe check. Mm-hmm. And we have to look at things that we typically weren't always looking at, like the destination of funds, as well as many of the patterns in the middle between when an account is created and when the money is out. Has the user changed their password? Have they logged in? Where did they log in from? Is this a bot, the IP address? Is this coming from a data center? And that is really key to how we are thinking about it at Unit21.
Tricia, this is probably a question for you, I guess, but every time I do one of these liveness checks, it's always like the same standardized, like I was joking around doing, but they never seem to prompt like any kind of additional like liveness type of things, like, moving your mouth around or like blinking. I mean, it's like additional things that your body would naturally do that an AI couldn't necessarily generate. Like, obviously hands are always an issue with AI generated stuff. So I don't know if that was something that you were aware of that was out there to kind of catch these kind of random.
We're seeing companies do this, and we last year, now it's been over 12 months, we already, where AI is, it's doing a pretty good job even with liveness checks. There was this, in fact, even with there was this $25 million scam where in Hong Kong, a hedge fund lost money, where the CFO was asked, like, hey, by the scammer, like, hey, you need to pay this money to me or to this account. And then they said, okay, can you get on a Zoom call? And even through Zoom, with these like tiny screens, the person wasn't able to see properly, but they felt like, okay, yeah, this is a legitimate, transaction. And then they made it. And so really where our perspective at Unit21 is that just relying on KYC is not enough. You have to not just do transaction monitoring, you have to do data monitoring. The way that you have to look at all of your data is going to be really important. And you can't just look at, okay, I have like these 5 transaction rules and that's it. If you're not leveraging all of your data to see where are the breadcrumbs that a fraudster may have left some evidence, then it's going to be really difficult. So, all right, this is a scary time. And let's dive into the next poll question, which is, okay, scary time right now with AI-driven fraud and fin crime. What is your biggest concern today? And folks, the poll is live. So if you look at the chat, feel free to go on the poll and vote.
I think one of my biggest concerns with this emerging generative AI is that as I represent a smaller community bank, that we won't have the resources to be able to manage all this new risk. And yet we have to. So it's just kind of figuring out, like, how do we adapt and pivot, especially when we have, a smaller budget than like a larger regional bank or a larger national bank.
To me, it almost sounds like what we do in law enforcement is when you have a bunch of agencies that have small budgets, they tend to commingle together the resources. So they'll create a center that each one contributes to, and then they use that to kind of facilitate. So if you have 5 or 6 police departments and they need a couple of people to do crypto or tech or computer downloads or whatever, they'll pool resources at that one location, and then they use that place as a fielding for questions, for phone downloads, because they don't have the option to support those expensive tools. So that's been an option of what we do.
That's really smart. I'm curious, Haley, I know you speak to a ton of people all over the country. What are you hearing as the biggest concerns?
Yeah, I was going to say it's that siloed data. The fact that we are, there are these smaller organizations and even the larger ones, if we just had insights into knowing exactly where that payment's going and what controls are in place, that, if we were to reach out, is there any kind of real time that we could get it in, collaboration with another FI to say, hey, we're sending something. Is this going to go to a legit person? Like, can we see your KYC? That'd be great, right? Can we see how you authenticated? But I think it's the siloed data, and it's not even just the external siloed data. It's the siloed data within our own organizations, that our payments teams aren't talking to our fraud teams, aren't talking to the operations teams, and aren't communicating with frontline staff. Like, everyone needs to be communicating what's happening in their departments so that we can combat this together with consistency and truly have that collaborative nature approach to addressing these new threats as they become risk to our organizations.
Yeah, that's that FRAML, right? Used to have the fraud and AML space. Now you see people obviously getting closer together now because they realize, hey, you can't have 2 people doing the same task that aren't communicating with the data. It just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And actually, the poll, thank you everyone who voted, it is really reflecting the conversations here. The biggest reason that people are saying is the transaction monitoring system is not robust enough. And that's exactly what the conversation here is. The data is too siloed. We're not monitoring enough data. We're not looking at the right things. And because of that, we're not able to fight against this really serious growth of financial crime vector that is going to only proliferate more in the future. Folks also mentioned...
Sorry, I was just going to say, and with the transaction monitoring not being robust enough, it goes back to the whole investing in getting your exit strategy together, because it's no longer if you're going to do it, it's when. You have to, in order to remain relevant and to stay, in this ever-changing and growing, industry that we're in financial institutions, and the more real-time and instant gratification that consumers want, we have to get in front of this. We can no longer live in the reactive world of fraud fighting. We've got to make sure that our partners and our systems that we're using are connected properly. The integration is great. The infrastructure is well understood across the organization, and we've just got to do a better job. So if the transaction monitoring system is not robust enough, look for that strategy.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that it's important to be, not to be relevant, but to make sure that you are operating at the edge of technology. And that is really important for everyone to recognize at all times. And then I also want to call out too many false positives was the second biggest reason before we dive into protecting customers, which is really, Dana, what you mentioned in terms of there's only so much bandwidth. So this is the number of scams is increasing, the number of phone calls we're getting from customers is increasing. There's only so much bandwidth. And that's a challenge for folks today. So we've talked for the last half an hour about what are the problems. Now let's focus on, okay, what can we do? This is where the world is. It's not going to be easy. What can we do going forward? I would love to get thoughts. Haley, what do you think is a good way to ensure that customers, our end users, are protected?
First, it's going to be foster a culture of awareness, training your frontline employees to recognize and address scams as they're happening, empowering your staff to educate customers. It's not just, oh, fraud's happening, what do I do? It's, oh, fraud's happening, let me make sure that my customer knows that I am their trusted entity, I'm their trusted financial institution, and I'm going to make sure that they understand exactly what's going on. Not just, hey, this is a scam, we're not going to let you do it, but educating them on how this is a scam. What are those red flags that we were, that we identified, and how they can take steps to better protect themselves. Becoming those trusted sources of information during routine interactions, and celebrating employees who go the extra mile in preventing fraud, reinforcing the importance of vigilance and proactive engagement. At my prior organization, we instituted Scooby Snacks, and it sounds simple and it sounds silly, but let me tell you, it worked. And, giving that praise to those employees that, the ultimate goal, or, as an organization, we're going to think, well, it's your job, you should do it. Yeah, but a thanks goes a long way. And celebrating and encouraging those individuals to continue to fight fraud, it really works. Educating customers on the regular, doing workshops, webinars, customized tips tailored to the specific emerging threats, and providing actionable advice. I think this is done through storytelling. I always try to be relatable in any time that I have a conversation, because I want you to know I understand where you're coming from. And when we're able to do that, we really resonate with our customers. And because we are their financial institution, we know a lot more about them than they think we do. We know what, when they come into the bank and what they do with their transactions. And so being able to say, hey, we understand this is outside your normal. Here's how you can, better protect yourself. And then the last thing I want to say is instituting some form of two-way communication, allowing customer feedback channels for customers to report suspicious trends. There's so many times I've had call centers that say, we are being flooded by, hey, we're getting this call, this bank impersonation scam. What do you want us to do with that information? Well, if we're able to actually get that information, collect that data, then we can create reports to identify specific trends that are occurring against our organization. And then we can make educational campaigns specific for those trends. And then we have become that proactive and active outreach for our customers. So I kind of went on a tangent there, but that's where I feel the most passionate. We have to do more.
I think you hit it right on the head, though. The word is proactive, right? You can't wait for scams to happen or frauds to happen. You need to be proactive about these things. So getting out into the public and talking to your frontline workers, like you said, doing ongoing trainings, putting, webinars out like this, like just being more proactive with your customers and trying to, even as far as like having someone in-house that's scanning the internet for potential scams, right? Going on Telegram and looking for what's the up and coming real-time scam pattern that's happening, being more dynamic with what frauds are occurring out there and trying to get ahead of it while it's happening or before it happens.
I want to just kind of like call out / praise Haley. Really, I view you, Haley, as like a role model when it comes to building that fraud culture in your organization. And the chat was loving the Scooby Snacks reference. How did you just real quick, I don't want to totally sidetrack us, but like, how did you come up with that and get your organization to like let you do that? Because it's so creative, and sometimes you just need something a little different to get people's attention.
Well, I'm a 90s baby, so Saturday morning cartoons were a real thing for me. Scooby was always my favorite investigator. So, it just I just remember that they were given a sweet treat for, I think it was like filing CTRs correctly or something. And I was like, well, what if we like did a whole thing on this? And we did Scooby Snacks, and, it wasn't a big lift, financially for the organization. So I put together, I had an awesome manager at the time, and she's in the comments, Robin Davis. She said, hey, put together a plan. Let me know how much you need, and let's talk through what this looks like. And so being able to provide like handwritten notes that said, and I usually keep a card up there, but it says they would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you. And so being able to provide them, hey, this is what you did that was great, and also highlighting them on the internal SharePoint. So it wasn't a large financial request, and it was just an opportunity to give back and just to give a little extra from me personally. And it worked well. And then we were even able to track that to see what departments were reporting the most. Where do we need to update our education, and if there are some inconsistencies with like how we're reporting or whatever. So it provided a lot to us by instituting this type of culture for our organization.
You know what that is, though? It's leadership is what that is.
Yes.
People don't teach that anymore, unfortunately, and good leadership is hard to find, and you have to be taught it. And if you're not willing to be a little humble and recognize you don't know everything, your organization is going to fail. And I see that in law enforcement all the time, believe me.
I love that. Yeah. Haley, thanks for letting me call you out. And also Matthew, like the fact of like the different, I don't know if you said police stations, but them kind of like coordinating to take advantage of those shared resources. That's also really cool. Trisha, do you want me to add my last thoughts on this? I mean, I don't really have a lot to add. I really feel like Haley's the expert on this topic, but since I do represent the bank side, I did see in the chats that we had people asking about when you know that your customer is doing something that is likely a romance scam, that is sending a wire to someone in a different country, like, can you literally prevent that transaction? What are some tips and advice? And I am not, typically the person doing that transaction at the front line, but one idea that I saw that you could talk about is, if you have that relationship with a customer and, no one wants to feel like they're being scammed, but you could offer them, what would happen if you said no to your internet friend the next time, and just kind of see how they respond to that. And that kind of empowers the person who might be a fraud victim to try something and kind of see for themselves. I thought that was an interesting tip. I don't know if folks have tried that, but another thing you can say is, as your trusted financial partner, I'm telling you with your best interest in mind, that this appears to be a scam. But again, I think it's really tough because a lot of people have kind of that mental block that they don't want to think they're being scammed. But feel free to share your comments in the chat. And by the way, there's something happened. So the comments that I'm writing are showing up as Trisha. And I noticed like I was commenting as Trisha while she was talking. So yeah. If that's confusing enough.
We've melded into one personality. Yeah. So I do. I love it. It's the fraud fighters unite. I do fully agree. I think one of the big issues is need and greed. Those are the two ingredients for a fraudster. They create greed or they get a sense of need. and then they exploit that in the victims. So even if there is a little bit more time given for a victim to just step back and be like, is that normal? Am I reacting on an impulse? Then often we see that they don't typically complete the transaction. And this education focus that really amazing to see, Haley. And also I love how many Scooby fans are there in the audience. But this focus on education is really important. I do want to say education is super important, is one of our biggest combating factors against the fraudsters. But also they are leveraging AI, so we need to also leverage AI. And how companies are going to leverage AI to fight back is going to really define whether we win this war or not. So there are many use cases of AI, right? Like AI can be leveraged anywhere. One use case of AI is the initial chat GPTs. Like I could ask questions about my data. More recent examples have been on AI agents. Can you have an agent do an L1 review? Or can you have an agent do research about an entity on the internet? So, Dana, you're on the forefront of this. What do you think about AI and what companies need to keep in mind as they are implementing AI?
For sure. So I'm definitely going to talk about some examples of how we all can specifically use it, but I do want to touch on the governance piece first, because I think it's a barrier maybe in some people's minds currently on if they can start exploring this if they work for a bank or a credit union. And I would recommend you all to pull up at some point in time the Federal Reserve's AI program. It's an AI governance document that talks about how they consider AI, how they categorize AI, and how they do their own governance of it. It's not a requirement for banks or credit unions, but I do think having a AI governance policy for your financial institution is a must, even if it says we're not touching AI currently, but it will give you kind of a framework. And sometimes having a framework can help you overcome that paralysis of like indecision. So anyways, having that AI governance framework, the Federal Reserve's AI program will give you some tips there. Also reading the NIST AI framework. That's a great, I love a good regulatory framework, but might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's going to walk you through how to think of what controls to have in place when you are working with AI. And then also take a read or kind of brush up your knowledge and understanding of model risk management. And that's the governance area of models. And when you're putting inputs into things, understanding how the output is being calculated to make sure that it's explainable. So, but again, I'm throwing out a lot of things, but the first thing would be to have an AI governance policy. And my second point before I dive into the actual examples would be that my personal belief is that we must start exploring and taking advantage of AI simply to keep up with the risks. At my financial institution, if the more we take advantage of AI, I don't foresee any jobs going away. At my situation personally, we're simply, if we don't adopt AI, we're simply not going to be able to manage as much risk and potentially have some inappropriate outcomes. So that's my soapbox on the governance piece. Happy to talk more. That could be its own great workshop for practitioners, Trisha. Some specific ways that we can use AI would be, the first would be help with fine tuning of monitoring rules. So generative AI can kind of look and see across all your data, what are some of the patterns and trends, and suggest some rules that maybe you hadn't contemplated yourself in your manual work. Another thing that we could use is help using AI agents to help with those level 1 reviews, which Trisha mentioned. So this could be if you can set up some specific rules for what your thresholds are, the AI, and again, I might be using the term AI kind of to describe a variety of things. It can give you that first pass, and it's not making a decision per se, but it's saving you the time in gathering all that research so a human can make that final decision and see if a further review is needed. And to me, if I could just simply have help with kind of the researching aspect, that's a huge time save. AI could be used in anomaly detection, so kind of identifying patterns that deviate from the norm. And it could be using some like what we would consider machine learning techniques. You can continue to get more data to make your detection more efficient. Research, I absolutely love playing with AI for different research. And this can also be good for if you have business customers, kind of scraping all the information available, if there's any news you need to know about. And then one thing that I think Unit21 is offering, which I'm sure Trisha could share more, is they have the ability to automatically draft an alert narrative. So, and this could also incorporate your bank or financial institution's template. So sometimes I struggle with business writing. So just to have someone or something do a first pass, which I can review and put my own judgment on and own that decision, that would be a huge help. So I just rattled off a ton of things, but those are the things that I wanted to share today.
Thank you, Dana. And really, the frameworks that you have in mind is really helpful. There were a few questions for people of how do you convince compliance, CAMLO to trust AI, and this is, I think, just having a framework that, okay, this is not something that our company is thinking in isolation. This is where the world is going is very helpful.
Yeah, and I am like an auditor by training, and I am so skeptical. But I think when you read the Federal Reserve's AI governance framework, you start to dive into understanding how different types of AI work and different applications. You can kind of start to see a range of use cases where some of them are literally functioning like an intern, and they're simply gathering data for you. And you can go exactly back to that source document and check it. So I feel like that is maybe a certain risk. And then maybe there's other things where an AI is making decisions and pushing things in production without any human interaction. I would consider that much higher risk. But when you start with the framework and you really identify what the risk is and kind of work at it from that way, that's kind of the incremental steps you take to get your organization comfortable with it. And yeah, I would love to do more conversation on that topic.
I think,
absolutely.
Haley, didn't you say it earlier? Actually, you mentioned something about the how did you say it? It should be used to enhance decision making, right? Not so much replace it, right? Because we don't want, and that's probably what the biggest fear is, right? Especially I can see from our perspective, our command staff going, well, hey, you guys can't rely on this, and people certainly would if they didn't have a framework in place to say, hey, you're violating something, right, or you're doing it wrong. So I think if we're looking at this from the perspective of enhancing human decision making as opposed to replacing it, I think that's probably what makes people want to use it more frequently.
Absolutely. And I think that the case is also for enhanced investigations, so like the case prioritization. So if you're looking and you are working through your list of alerts, sure, it may score it, but if you're looking at the scores and maybe it's not considering everything, right? You want to have a case management system or some AI that can look and say, okay, here's what this looks like. Here's what the online banking read and said that it was doing. Now we know this is actually something that money is going out. It's not just a high alert for online account takeover, but it's online account takeover plus funds transferred. That needs to be at the top of your list so that you can proactively get in front of that before that ACH file goes out, that origination file. And, just being able to analyze case data to prioritize those investigations. And having Gen AI act as like a virtual assist. So triaging those fraud alerts to identify the high risk cases requiring that immediate attention. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this. With respect to what we are seeing, and we launched AI like every other company. We slapped AI, to be honest, on our product initially, and then we realized that with respect to this space, there is a risk reward question. To your point, Dana, where is the lowest risk and the highest reward? And our realization was it's in that alert review process and writing the alert narrative from doing that research, where 80% of the work in an alert is just gathering information, and that's it. It's like hunter-gatherer work. And that's where we decided that, okay, let's focus on that because that is explainable. There's a human in the loop. The human makes the final decision. The reward is significant. You can reduce 80% of your manual work. And the risk is acceptable. The risk is quite low. So I think there's a great framework that you highlighted, Dana, of like start with, walk, crawl, run, or crawl, walk, run, and start with what is the lowest risk, highest reward right now, and then build that up over time.
I do want to add too, with the fine tuning that Dana mentioned, fraud detection and prevention, this is not like a set it and forget it endeavor. Fraudsters are constantly innovating, devising new tactics to bypass even the most advanced defenses. So for financial institutions, this means fraud detection and prevention must be treated as an ongoing, evolving effort, not something that can be set up once and left alone. And then I want to say, you mentioned the facts earlier, Trisha. Fraud fighting without technology is like replying to an email with a telegram. Fraud evolves at the speed of technology, and attempting to combat it with outdated tools or methods is just not efficient, and it's ineffective. Modern fraudsters leverage sophisticated techniques from AI-driven scams to complex social engineering schemes, leaving behind those who cling to legacy systems or manual processes. So we can't not combat it with technology. We've got to continue to go as technology evolves.
I love it. Fighting fraud without technology is like replying to an email without Telegram. And this is really a big key takeaway for me that from this conversation, that we have to be at the forefront of technology because our competitors were these horrible fraudsters and horrible bad actors who commit heinous crimes. They are doing that. And there is a way, as has been outlined today, with respect to governance, that we can do it in an explainable way. All right, so let's dive into the last poll for today, which is when do you plan to incorporate AI into your risk or compliance programs? All right, let's give folks a minute.
Someone in the audience had the question of where would that AI governance program live? And I don't have a perfect answer, but I said it could be like an enterprise risk owner. It could be an information security owner, a data owner. And I just wanted to ask that while we were doing the polling question, because I don't have a perfect answer for that, but those are places I've seen.
Yeah, what we are seeing is that typically there is a security team which ensures that from a DPA perspective, from a data protection and privacy perspective, everything is in line with the vendor's approach to AI. But how the AI is being incorporated is ultimately that business unit, which in our industry is a risk and compliance business unit, that is making the final decision. Great. Okay, so as we have now closed the poll, most people don't know when they are going to incorporate AI. And some people have already incorporated AI, but it really is, I would say, a quarter of our participants sometime in 2025 by the early or late. Some already, a quarter have incorporated to at least some degree, but almost half do not know yet. So that is I think today is hopefully good point of thinking about, okay, what do we do about this? Is there any last comment that the three of you have for the hundreds of people who are watching today on who are not entirely sure about what when they want to incorporate AI? What is the one piece of advice that you would give them?
I have one quick thing for people to consider, especially the group that says we're not interested in incorporating or we don't have any plans yet. Also think about if your key vendors are using AI and incorporating those questions into your third-party risk management program, because it is possible and likely that your vendors might be using AI, and that would be something that you would need to incorporate into your program. And that's my last tip, and just glad everyone was here today.
I'll add, there's even, this is going to answer another question that's in the chat. It says, what about concerns regulators are heading in a direction that FI should reimburse transactions the customers know they authorized but claim they were deceived? So if that is coming, if that shift is coming from regulators and you don't have AI and you don't have any plans, it might be time just to get acquired by somebody else. Because then you're just going to pay all the scams to all the people who are even pretending, and you're going to have first party fraud that is going to skyrocket. You've got to have the technology in place so that we can truly authenticate who is conducting the transaction and verify that the person who's doing it is the actual person that applied for the account.
The only thing I'll add is just I think everybody needs to look at their current workflow and see where you could incorporate AI and how you best want to do it. I can think of a million different ways I would use it for work, and I think each institution is going to be different in how they want to incorporate it. But you obviously have to do it in a justified manner. So there's obviously going to be some kind of testing process in place. Things you're gonna have to worry about risk management and stuff. But if like Dana was saying, if you guys have a decent framework or you borrow someone's framework, at least getting something in place so that you guys can get it rolling.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all for sharing your counsel with everyone. So just to wrap things up, for us that are leveraging AI to win, we have to. There is no other route. As Haley mentioned, as Dana mentioned, that it's really important. You already have vendors; they may be leveraging AI, and if they are not, then really think about what you want to do there. But the application for AI automation is immense, and look at your own workflows, as Matt mentioned. And then finally, one of the biggest takeaways from this is black box AI is not acceptable. So as you are putting in workflows, ensure that you have explainability. And thanks to everyone who've shared the different governance frameworks from regulators already. Okay, great. And on that note, we, as Unit21, we are doing a lot of work with AI. So we are going to be doing a webinar and a product demo on our AI agents and how we have seen customers find value in this in a couple weeks on February 12th. So hope to see everybody there. We're actually going to dive into the product so you can see live what are your peers doing with AI. And finally, thank you everyone for taking your time. We didn't get a chance to dive into a separate section for Q&A, but hopefully you got some of your questions answered through our time today. Thank you again, Dana, Haley, and Matt, for taking your time, for sharing your expertise. This is so exciting. I really feel like we're in 95 and the computers are just coming about. So I cannot wait for seeing how this year is going to shape out. This is the most exciting thing for me as the CEO of Unit21 is is shaping how AI is going to be used in this industry. So thank you all for taking your time, and hopefully see you in the next product demo.
Take care.